Everybody, this is Robert and Rick. I'm Robert.
Rick.
We're from Anitian, and we're going to talk about, well, primarily red team testing, but it has lots of components, which we're going to see. We're going to talk a lot about social engineering. We're going to talk about, gathering intel and doing some OSINT, some intel gathering on the internet to try and kind of establish your reconnaissance and get data about a client or a client. Let's just keep it there. We're not doing anything here illegal. We're all friends.
White hat.
Yeah, totally on the white and white.
Yeah.
We're going to try to give you a demo. We're going to do the notorious live demo of a hacking demonstration.
We will attempt a live demo.
We did one last time that went smoothly and perfectly. This one's going to do exactly the same thing because they always do.
No pressure.
Nope. That's on you and me. It's on us.
Yeah.
And then we'll chat about how to defend and how to deal with some of the things that we find. So sound good to you?
Yeah. Well, I think we'll talk a little bit about pen test versus red team and some of the subtle differences, and then kind of just walk through the overall steps of kind of what a red team looks like and use the demo to illustrate some of that.
Yeah. So, let's get in on that. Penetration testing and red teaming. What are they? Are they the same thing? I don't think so. They're not.
Like, there's definitely similarities.
You do a lot of the same activities, but we've got some data here. Let's take a look at this. And a lot of people have very specific notions about a pen test, and red team and those sorts of more industry terms aren't necessarily as widely known or disseminated. So pen testing, we're all kind of basically familiar with. You chat with a client, you get a scope of servers, you go through and you test them, you give them results. It's kind of the basis of a pen test. You sit down and you define, what you're testing because you don't want to step on anybody's toes.
Right. They give you a list. They're like, here's our list of IPs, test these, don't test anything else.
Right.
Just these. These are the only ones in scope for the test. That's
definitely not that over there.
Yeah, exactly.
Under no circumstances.
Yeah. We know about that one. That one's bad. That one's too sensitive, or whatever. For whatever reason, it's not scope. But they give us the list.
Right. The client helps you essentially in a lot of the steps of a pen test because, for instance, they give you remote access when you're testing the inside.
Right.
You might, if you have the external network as part of the scope, you might get access in the course of that, but it's not guaranteed.
Right. You might be able to get in and then pivot and try to do some internal stuff from there.
Right.
But a lot of times we'll just get like a VPN access in,
mm-hmm.
and it kind of makes it a little easier on us.
It
obviously.
makes it very much easier when they just let you in.
Right.
And then you can run rampant in the inside.
And it also guarantees that we get in to test the inside. So.
And we'll get more into that at the end of this. But more differences, the kind of along the scope, the terms of the engagement are well defined. They want you to test for a reason, whether for compliance or for best practices, or they're new and they need to figure out a baseline or something. Right.
Or they'll say, this is an external only pen test or an internal only or some combination or a web application test or a social engineering test.
Right.
But you're in these kind of specific brackets of service,
mm-hmm.
right? Versus a red team test, which is often.
Which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is one of the largest differences between a pen test and a red team, which we'll see here. So the real takeaway from a penetration test is that it's really an information gathering exercise. You, as the pen tester, are trying to give your client data on the vulnerabilities and weaknesses and strengths. There's the posture of their network. And you want to do that holistically. You want to get as much as possible because that's the most value.
Yeah, but again, it's still within scope of whatever service they're looking at. So it may not, they may not want a social engineering test. They may only want an external pen test, in which case that's the only thing they're going to see.
Yeah.
Because that's all we're testing.
Yeah, I should say that's probably one section where going above and beyond is not well regarded, because if they pay for an external pen test and you come back with a full physical wireless social posture that you tested, they might get a little angry at you.
Yeah, we might get in trouble.
You might very well get into trouble.
Yeah.
So red teaming is very similar, except we kind of touched on this. The scope is very loosely defined usually. Like, it's come in and hack us, this company.
Yeah, like in the past, I've seen like, here's our brands.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we're giving you.
Right.
And then we have to do all the research to figure out, okay, what IP addresses do they own? What domains do they own? You know, what do their emails look like?
No defined
Where are their
perimeter.
employees?
Nothing.
Nope. We do all this research and we compile a bunch of it and then bring it to them and say, okay, this is what we found. Now you tell us which of these things are in scope, because we may find things that aren't actually owned by them. And obviously we can't attack that. Or we may find things that are hosted externally that require some special permission, or, you know, maybe they still have some restrictions on some sensitive systems they just really don't want to risk taking down, so we can't attack them. But the point being—
Or you might find things that they didn't even know about.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting exercise too, because they may see, just for them to see what we're able to find through public information is sometimes very eye-opening.
Yeah,
you may not know what's out there.
That's a large part of the value of a red team. Really, is the reconnaissance takes a long time necessarily, because when you're just invited to infiltrate a company based on the company's name and nothing else, you're going to find data, and unless they're doing a lot of active monitoring of their own internet position and posture, which I don't know anybody who tends to.
Yeah,
not many at least.
Maybe just looking for phishing domains, and that's about it.
Right.
Similar domains.
But not like monitoring username dissemination throughout the internet, monitoring forum posts or GitHub or Pastebin or.
No, and I've even found like some IT director did an interview with like VMware, and they're talking about their VMware infrastructure, and I'm like, I'm taking notes.
Sweet.
Like, okay, now I know what they're running.
Runs VMware.
Yeah, exactly. Or what antivirus solution they're using. I'm like, well, that's really helpful as an attacker.
That's fantastically useful, yeah.
So you find that kind of stuff, which in just a pen test, you might not find that.
Yeah, that's kind of taken for granted in a pen test, because it's not really, it doesn't tend to be the point.
Right.
You don't tend to see too many pen tests of OSINT, of just gathering data. So another difference, red teams are pretty much always kind of all-encompassing. I mean, you can obviously define the scope of red team to exclude sections if that's the point of it, but by their nature, red teams, tend to have to encompass the external network, the internal network, web applications, social engineering, up to maybe even physical sometimes.
Yeah. Ideally, we're trying to simulate like what a real world motivated attacker could do. And a real world motivated attacker has no restrictions. They don't care about your scope. They don't care about your sensitive systems. They don't care about any of that.
And they don't care about the law, which we still have to do.
Yes, but point being, the more you limit it, the kind of the farther away from that you're getting.
Right.
And so ideally, we would have as much in scope as possible and within reason. And that way you can test every aspect of your security program.
Which leads into the next one, that most people in the company are not going to be aware that a red team is going on. Usually, at least in our experience, we're contacted by, maybe the director of IT and security, and sometimes that's it. Like literally that's it. Not even the board knows that it's going on, or, the C or D level or anybody. Because
they want to test their ability to detect and react and respond. And, does everyone's hair burst into flames and they're freaking out, or are they following procedures and taking care of things the way that they're supposed to be? Or maybe they find out that they don't have the right procedures in place and they didn't even realize it,
Maybe they find that out.
Whereas a pen test might be like everyone's they all know about it. They want you to run it during business hours in case something goes down, they can fix it, and kind of everyone's aware of what's happening.
So, I mean, to that, almost anything goes. Again, it can be pared down by scope. The last 2 points, kind of comparing and contrasting. Usually in a pen test, you test things programmatically and systemically. So you'd start on like the external, and then move over to maybe the web apps, and then maybe move into the internal. And it's a phased sort of approach a lot of the time. Whereas a red team necessarily is very messy. Testing a red team, basically you do your reconnaissance, and then you just sort of hone in on whatever you can find and dive. So if that's, through the internal or through the external and into the internal, or through social engineering, and then into a web app, and then into an internal, the paths can look all different directions.
Right. If you test them all at once, you have a much bigger chance of gaining access, because there's so many different ways you could get in that way. But if you're only testing the extra perimeter and you're like, well, there's nothing there, you look good.
Yeah.
But then if you do a social engineering test and find that half the people are running some malware when you send them, then if it was part of a red team, we would have all this remote access.
Right.
But in social engineering tests, it's more like, okay, we know they clicked the thing, and you could have been compromised, kind of.
And that's that's a thing to bring up, is that a red team is limited by that, because the attacker needs to go slowly and deliberately, but also intentionally. So you're going to take the first exploit that you find.
That's true.
And then you're going to stop looking for those exploits, and you're going to dig around in that. And if it's successful, then you keep going. And if it's not, you pull back and try another one. Whereas in a pen test, you really are trying to gather, you're trying to test everything, you're trying to gather all of the data, which you just don't do in a red team because you don't frankly have time or the flexibility. Like, you can't blast a company with a full-fledged, Nessus or Nexpose vulnerability scan because their logs are going to go nuts.
Yeah, and in a red team, you're kind of trying to stay under the radar because they don't know what's going on, and if they, it's part of the test. If you kind of don't want them to find you, and then they want to see if they can find you.
Their SecOps team might, detect you, and then it might be game over if they've got their stuff in order.
And then we can't have any more fun. So.
And that honestly for us is the end of it.
Yeah.
Then our game time is done. So.
Okay, so let's look at some.
Talk about external techniques.
Yeah, external techniques.
So now we're just strictly talking about red teaming, because that is what we're
going to
go. But we wanted to define at least what a penetration test is in contrast with a red team. So we touched on this quite a lot.
Yeah, we kind of talked about a lot of this stuff. But.
We did, but it's fantastically important, and it's kind of underappreciated in a pen test because, again, you almost never really need to do it. We tend to do it a little bit when we do our pen tests. Kind of on a quick and dirty level, just to get that little extra information, and because we're used to it, because it can be helpful if we find something.
Yeah, I'll definitely do some of this stuff on pen tests, as it makes sense to do. A lot.
But we won't spend weeks. We're not going to deep dive into users' Facebook profiles.
No, we don't need to learn about their personal lives or something.
But we do. I mean, you do that on a red team.
Yeah, like in a pen test, I might scrape LinkedIn and grab a bunch of employee names and convert them into what I think are their possible emails, and then use that against their remote access system kind of thing. And we'll do that in a red team too.
Definitely,
if it makes sense.
Well, and let's. Passive intelligence gathering, and we should define what passive is versus active. I think we go over active in a bit.
Yep. Yeah, passive is more like, what can we find without actually touching your infrastructure? Like things that you really just can't detect are very, very unlikely to detect because.
What can we get without making a log entry that somebody cares about?
So a lot of that's like Google searching and using other types of search engines to pull this information.
There are lots of very powerful platforms like that, like Shodan and Maltico.
We actually have a slide on that. Here we go.
We do, yeah. Lots of DNS information. Whois is all.
We can use those to figure out domain information, potentially employee information, like who's registered on the domain names. Whois can give us IP blocks that are owned by your company, that kind of thing. Domain big data is kind of a cool one I found because you can pull up one domain and then if you can actually click on the email registered to that domain, it'll show you all the domains registered by that email. So if it's registered by some corporate email and it's like, oh, this company also has 100 other domains, and now that gives me a lot of info as an attacker. And Shodan can show you open ports, almost like ports. It's like a search engine for open ports and services.
Yeah,
it's like Google, but for more than
people.
Just HTTP. Yeah. So we can use that to see what likely services you have open.
So the Google searching and dorking is basically also Google for evil people. Really.
I
mean, if you've never done it, you can get incredibly frightening things out of Google.
Yeah.
Just pull up somebody's admin cPanel or their webcams in their data center, or on and on and on.
Have it been owned? That's another good one. Anyone can use that site. Basically, whenever there's a public breach, this guy tries to get all the information related. You can type in your email and see if you've ever been owned by MySpace breach or whatever other breach.
Yeah.
And that can be useful in an attack because we can search for your employee emails in there. And if they've been breached and we can download that data and we can crack their password, maybe they're reusing that on your network.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I actually found a script that automates this. Someone made just very recently.
Have to share that.
Anyway,
sales tools, things like Salesforce and what's another one I'm drawing a blank on. Tapping salespeople is actually a really good way of gathering data on a company, because if you notice, people with lots of links into a company from vendors, let's say, then you might have a good idea of some of the hardware they've released or software they've released been flogged or that they might be running. And at the end of the day, if you do get a lot of sales data, you've probably got a lot of company email addresses.
Yeah, you're talking about names, emails,
that's where it gets good.
Phone numbers, and titles.
Yeah.
Like who's who in the organization.
So you can form an org tree. You can figure out who reports to who. what everybody's job is, possible usernames.
You can get a lot that way.
You can get a lot.
And all this stuff, most of the stuff we get without even touching your infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the active stuff, which is kind of the next phase beyond the passive searching. So this is where we're actually going to start touching your infrastructure, things that you may actually notice. So we need to be careful and kind of run. And in a red team test, we'll be careful. And
Again,
in test, we may just blast it.
Yeah.
If it makes sense. But
well, yeah. I mean, if we find that they have no SOC and no anything like that, it might be. But even then, we'd still be a little careful about it.
Yeah, so we might look for running services and versions of services running. In case we're missing patches, things we can exploit pretty easily. What web applications you have, we may crawl them or set up some automated spiders to try to find vulnerabilities in those apps.
Right. That's a big one because your web apps are typically just hanging out on the internet like they would be.
Yeah, nowadays that's kind of like one of the biggest external things, biggest ways to get into the external network, right? It's like a lot of people's external perimeters are heavily guarded.
Mm-hmm.
You see maybe the only thing you can see are websites, but those sites are not just static anymore. They're all like usually very complicated applications.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can exploit that, we can potentially get a shell, and then we got a foot in the door.
Though a lot of them are on VPSs or up in a cloud somewhere, so that can get That gets trickier, but data's data.
Yeah, if it's like a banking site or something, I mean, we can still get banking info that way potentially. So
we keep bringing up phone information. You want to speak about that?
Phone?
Yeah. I think that leads us into a next. Well, we can cover Google Dorking Active. Google Dorking Active would be just the Google searching for the really evil people, where you're actually going and you get the results from your Google searches on the company, but you actually find vulnerable infrastructure just hanging out there. So then you're making connections into it and actually trying to mess with it.
Or maybe like hosted PDF files that are hosted on their site that you then click on and download them to see, maybe there's sensitive info in there and they didn't realize it was being indexed by Google for everyone to find.
Yeah. This happens.
The phone's kind of a weird one. I guess it just depends. I mean, so you might use that for social engineering, but also if you can get access to the PBX, you may be able to break into voicemails or something like that. And if you can get access to someone's voicemail, you may be able to pull secrets out of there if they've got anything stored there, or you may be able to even use that in social engineering by having someone, you can pretend to be that person, like, leave me a voicemail or something, and then you can access it, right? But that person on the other end thinks that you really are that person because they've contacted your internal extension and left you a voicemail. Like, how would that not be?
And we talked about social engineering, I think, next. Is that right?
Let's find out. Okay. These are just some of the tools we use for the active stuff.
So, I mean, if you're running whatever tool suite, these should all look pretty familiar at this point. I mean, the phone call tool is not so much a script or anything you run, but it's a thing you do.
Well, manual process.
But we're all familiar with Netcat and Nmap. Burp Suite and Nikto are web app testing platform suites. They're massive and comprehensive, but they're very, very handy. Social engineering. We've got a Mitnick quote that people can read. So social engineering is often, it's very sexy. Everybody kind of loves it because we're all very fascinated by tricking people, and
it's like the James Bond stuff.
Yeah, it feels good to kind of do and get the results from, but you got to do it with a point.
Yeah,
like, it's got to be something you're testing because humans are friendly. Humans want to help. They're typically kind, especially in a job role where their function is to provide a service. So I mean, if the purpose of the social engineering test, if we're just talking about an isolated social engineering test, is can you hack our humans? The answer is yes, and you can stop the test.
Yeah, pretty much. It's always a weak link. Like there's always going to be someone.
There's going to be somebody
that falls for it.
At least somebody, possibly many somebody.
Hopefully only a couple. Right, that's like kind of the best thing you're going to be able to realistically hope for. Is most likely at least one or two people are going to fall for it. But if you see 50% of the employees in scope fell for it, then that tells you something else. So
you really need to test social engineering when you're testing social engineering against a purpose, against a policy. Maybe your call center is not supposed to give information to people without them providing, a PIN or some other identification. And if the social engineer can get that without, providing that information, that's a fail. And that's a totally valid, useful test,
right?
Because that tells you what your policies or your users are doing with your policies.
Or you've got password reset procedures.
Or password reset procedures.
And then I call up and I get them to reset a password and they don't follow the procedure. Like that tells you that either they don't care, or they were unaware of the procedure in the first place. Maybe it's a training problem. You know?
So that's a very purposeful, useful social engineering test.
Yeah, rather than just
can you do it?
Yeah,
like,
can you trick people?
Yes.
Like, well, yeah, we can trick people.
People can be tricked,
especially given enough time.
Everybody can be tricked in some way. There's no harm in that. In saying that.
And you're just some different examples of different types of social engineering. Email and phone are probably the most common thing we see. Yeah, but
typically, a couple times, you'll do some in person. You'll plant some like USB drives or mail people, a CD or something like that.
Yeah,
mailing finance with the latest QuickBooks update is a good one.
Yeah,
or just can you break in? Not break in. Usually you don't commit larceny or anything like that. But can you sneak in and take photos of like the server room to prove you're there?
Right.
So
otherwise, trying to get passwords, trying to get people to click on malicious links or log into fake websites that we set up that look like legitimate websites, and hopefully they log in with their domain credentials, that kind of thing.
Or download some malware.
Yeah, that could be even better because then we don't need their credentials. We just have access now.
That would be handy.
And that can also test technical controls too. If we send you malware and it doesn't make it through because you've got some firewall that blocks it, like, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we can whitelist it to still test the people, but the point being it gives you some information about your technical controls, which is good. Okay.
Breaking in. So now that we've kind of covered the basics of red teaming, reconnaissance, and the social engineering part of it, we're going to actually talk about the getting in, doing a red team kind of from top to bottom a bit. We're going to skip a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it in reference to the scenario from the blog post, which this webinar is based on. So if you've read the red teaming series on our blog, then you'll be somewhat familiar with this. But I'm kind of talk through it.
And we'll give a live demo.
Yeah,
it's totally going to work.
You will. So information gathering, and I'll skip over a lot of the stuff that didn't help because we do a lot of things.
It's literally, it can be weeks. We haven't done any engagement longer than weeks on the recon side because that gets a little nuts. But weeks, like honest weeks of recon.
Yeah, and we try lots of different things, and many of them don't work. So I'm not going to go over all the different things we did. I'll kind of stick to the things that worked just because that's kind of the most interesting. It's like the narrative of the attack without spending tons of time on all the stuff that didn't work. So information gathering, employee data. So here's an example of just looking up, using LinkedIn, searching for company Google, and just seeing who comes up, right? Obviously Google's a huge company or whatever, but a lot of our clients are.
Are they?
Well, a lot of our clients are much smaller, and so we might type in their company name on here and get 100 to 200 employees, something like that. And then we can grab all those names and compile them into email addresses if we can figure out what their email scheme is, which we can usually easily do via Google searches or a tool like the Harvester. We just type in their domain, and the Harvester actually can crawl LinkedIn.
The Harvester is a tool that you can get on a lot of platforms.
Free script.
Command line team.
So you can tell it to look at Google or LinkedIn or various other locations, and give just a domain name, and it'll look for email addresses and domains that are related to that domain. So we might use that or something, or just even manual or custom scripts or something to compile a list of potential email addresses or known good email addresses.
Yeah, the point of it really is that we want physicians, any sort of personal identifying information, usernames, if possible. Email address is definitely their name. A phone number is good for social engineering, their position in the company, that kind of thing.
And in the context of this particular attack that we did on this engagement, I'd spent a lot of time on the external perimeter, and I couldn't find any real exploitable vulnerabilities to get a foot in the door. And so, which
is actually pretty common.
Yeah, it is common,
most
and it's good for
networks.
them. It's a good thing. As the attacker, though, it's obviously frustrating, and we still want to try to find some way in. So I won't really be discussing the external stuff because in this case, there really wasn't a whole lot to see, and nothing really worked for us. So it kind of came back to this information gathering, and the thing that really helped us was having all of this information about their employees, because the next step was social engineering. I tried doing some email social engineering initially to get them to
just some little phishing, set up a domain.
Yeah, well, initially I sent them an email with some malicious attachment, but as a red team, the thing about social engineering is while it works almost every time,
it's very alarming.
Yeah, if someone sounds the alarm, suddenly everyone's freaking out and the engagement could be over. So I kind of wait, if I can get in more anonymously through the external perimeter, that's kind of better for me. But when that fails, when we move on to social engineering, I sent the email to a couple employees because I didn't want to send it to 200 people and have everyone freak out. No one fell for it. So I came up with this other idea where this is this actual screenshot from my email. I went back through my email and looked for the most boring email that I didn't even notice had come in, just something that you automatically ignore, and I found this webinar email for some whatever. It's like a product thing they're trying to sell or something. And I found that and used my email list. I had like 300 emails for this client, and I sent this email to all 300 people.
But you weren't phishing.
Like no, I wasn't.
This wasn't. There was no attempt to
get. The purpose of this was that they would ignore it, and I didn't want them to pay any attention to it and sound any alarm. I didn't want that.
So what's the point?
So the point was, a couple hours later, I checked my email and I had like 30 some odd auto replies from people saying I'm out of the office until such and such date. If you need anything, call my manager, this person at this extension, that kind of thing. So now I had a list of like 30 different people who I knew were out for the day.
Because email autoresponders for vacations usually include, contact hierarchy information or escalation information, and probably
signatures, email signatures that we can use in phishing attempts later.
Yeah.
But for me, one of the critical things was just knowing who was out of the office, because my intention was to do some phone social engineering, and I didn't want them to be in the office. My hope was that I could get access to their account by resetting their password, and if it worked and they're in the office, then they're immediately going to know something was wrong. And even if they don't know that a problem happened but they reset their password, then I'm locked out again. So I wanted someone who was out of the office, and this gave me a list of like 30 people, only a few of which were males. And since I needed a phone call, that it had to be a guy. Then I called. I got that guy's phone number through some sales, some sales tool we had. I got his phone number, his email, called his phone number, got his voicemail, so I knew he wasn't at his desk. And I called his voicemail maybe 5 times, and every time I was like, "Hi, this is John Doe." Blah, blah. I'm trying to copy his voice because I don't know. Like, first of all, this guy happened to be a director level person, and I kind of chose him because I figured they'd have a higher level of access than a lower employee, and that that may help. But I was a little bit worried that they may know who he is, so I was trying to duplicate his voice. And then I found using Google hacking, I found a PDF file with information that included the phone number for the service desk.
Sure.
So now I have the service desk number that I can reach externally.
And you've been practicing this guy's voice.
I can somewhat mimic his voice. I know who he is.
And you know his phone number.
And I know his phone number. So first what I did, this was through some of our other recon, I had found a page like this. This was their Citrix remote access gateway. And I found that you could, if you failed the password like 5 times, it would actually tell you that the account was locked out, which tells you one thing, that the account is a legitimate username, because otherwise it wouldn't get locked out. And the other thing, it actually helped me with the social engineering. So what I did was I typed this guy's username in and I locked his account out. Then I called up the service desk and I pretended to be him, and I was like, "Oh, I reset my password this morning and I just locked it out."
I just can't remember.
Yeah, and this was kind of important too, is I didn't just say, "Can you reset my password?" because I don't want to throw up red flags. It was more like I was kind of trying to be your typical annoying user, and they probably deal with this all the time, where they, he has to sit there and wait for you to type your password a bunch of times, and he just wants to get you off the phone, kind of thing. So I was like, "Oh, I locked myself out. I changed my password this morning. Can you please, can you unlock it?" All I asked him to do was unlock the account. Not too suspicious, and he did. And then I tried typing it again. Of course, I don't know the password, but each time, I had my telephone right next to the keyboard. I'm typing very loudly, and every time slower and more deliberately, like I'm like really trying hard to get this password. It locked me out again. I'm not sure. I just reset it this morning, just to kind of give him the idea.
This is my password.
Yeah, well,
I just reset this password.
I was trying to give him the idea that clearly I didn't know my password, because I reset it and obviously fat fingered it or forgot it or something. But I didn't want to ask him to reset it. I just wanted him to keep unlocking it, you know, and then he would have to come up with the idea on his own. And that's exactly what happened. Was he said, he's like, well, I can reset it for you if you want. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll have to do that. And so he's like, all right, give me a minute, and then, you know, try password 1 or whatever. And I try it, and I was in. I had remote access, which actually the Citrix. Actually, I had no access through Citrix. I was able to log in, but there were no published applications, so I couldn't do anything, which was quite disappointing. But I found VMware Horizon View system, which also allowed me to log in and gave me remote access to basically a virtual PC. So I had a virtual desktop as this domain level user.
So you had a foothold.
Yep, that was through the perimeter. So regardless of the fact that their external perimeter, all their technical controls were very sound, and I couldn't get in that way. All it took was one phone call and a whole bunch of research.
And weeks of research.
But really, one phone call and a bunch of enumeration stuff, and now we had a foot in the door, and they could have had the best security in the world on the perimeter.
And they might have, for all that mattered.
And actually, speaking of which, how could they have? We can talk about some ways they could have prevented some of those attacks.
Well, sure. I mean, you did a good job there with convincing the help desk person to make it their idea to reset your password to get you off the phone. But obviously, there needs to be a more thorough password vetting verification when you're dealing with any sort of help desk level thing. They need to identify that you are who you are. So having either some verbal passphrases, or probably better is a callback to a known number from the directory. And having some fail procedures if you can't actually do it, because I mean, while if you don't meet those criteria, you might not be able to work. Worse is if you hand somebody who is not them your password.
Yeah.
Which is what happened here.
Yeah, I mean.
And discouraging the use of autoresponders, which is how you kind of came up. Yeah. You got into this vacuum entirely.
I wouldn't say that's as critical, obviously.
I mean, it's best practice to not.
It's information leaking out of your organization that.
It is best practice to not let an autoresponder blast out to people outside of your contact.
At least not externally. Maybe you have a need to tell people you're out of the office, but you don't necessarily have to tell them how long you'll be gone. I knew this guy would be gone until Monday, and this was a Friday, so that let me know that I had all weekend to use this guy's account. Mm-hmm. And in all likelihood, with internal access, given a whole weekend, I could probably get access to a different account and no longer need his, right? So. Right.
And then some technical controls.
Multi-factor authentication, first of all. First and foremost was like they've got multiple remote access portals, and none of them required anything but a username and password. And so even if they didn't follow procedure and they reset the password for me, if I don't have their token or their phone or whatever it is, I'm not getting in that way. And that would have stopped me right there. I mean, the only thing that I really could have been able to do.
I mean, you had all weekend. You might have been able to get lucky on MFA.
Okay.
It's well, not with their lockouts, because they were actually doing some of the number 2, the tar pitting, of slowing down authentication attempts as you try them.
By locking out the accounts for like 30 minutes or however long.
Yeah. And that makes user and password enumeration actively infeasible.
Yeah.
And then bringing up the point, maybe the help desk doesn't necessarily need to be externally accessible, possibly not published on the internet widely. Yeah,
there was like a little hidden PDF thing, but again, that's some of the benefit of
it wasn't so hidden.
Kind of, hidden in that it probably wasn't easily viewable from their main website or something.
Sure.
But with the correct Google, string, it comes right up. So not hidden in that way.
I would definitely say in this that the help desk definitely needs to have some verification procedures and calling back on certain, basically privilege escalation or reset password issues.
Mm-hmm.
Would be the way to go, I would say.
Okay, so now we get to
it's demo time.
So
we're all counting on
we got a foot in the door now, right? We've got essentially RDP access, right? We've got desktop.
You've got a Horizon View machine, which actually presents some interesting other possibilities, but it's essentially a remote desktop.
So let's load up.
Most importantly, it's on the domain. You've got a domain user, a valid one. You don't really have any credentials, but I mean, working your way through a network with just a base user account is kind of what penetrating the internal network is about. Since you don't always find domain admin right off the top.
We're seeing this RDP on there. Not seeing it. Okay, give me a second.
Might be having our demo hurdle 1.
Yeah, there's something going on with my monitor. So let us see if this works.
There we go. Oh, that's a remote desktop.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is essentially what we would see, right? Is this just a window with remote desktop access? And I'm currently logged into this. Well, here, let's open up a command prompt. So I'm logged in as Bob Barker. We'll just pretend that's the person.
We hacked The Price is Right in 1989.
Yes, I social engineered Bob Barker's password, right? We can confirm who am I, Bob Barker.
To spay and neuter pets.
So the first thing we might want to do is see what kind of permissions I have, like what groups is this user in.
Sure.
So we can easily do that with command prompt. And we see that the only group they're in is domain users in this particular case. And then obviously our demo environment is very simplified. A lot of corporate environments, you see all kinds of like accounting and all kinds of stuff. But the important thing is they don't have any real IT permissions.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we got our foot in the door, but that's, we really want domain admin. That's kind of our main goal. Because domain admin, we kind of own the whole thing. So there are a bunch of different ways we can try to escalate. You may look for missing patches or service configurations or anything like that. But one of the easiest ways involves password security.
We've got a question.
What if there's a question. What if they're local admin? So actually, we're kind of leading into that. So this one's not a local admin, but okay. So where I was going with this is we're actually going to get local admin.
We're actually going to get local admin.
One of the easiest ways to escalate privileges would be if there's just passwords stored on the system, which we actually find a lot, either like an Excel spreadsheet or a text file or
buried in scripts.
That's a common one, especially with IT people, is they have like a PowerShell script or a Python script or something, and there's a password in there because they're the only ones that are supposed to have access to the script, and maybe it was just a temporary thing that they left in their downloads folder or something. Who knows? So in this case, if we go looking.
So I guess the answer to the question was, what if they were local admin? The answer is then you save yourselves a couple of steps.
Yeah, you do, because what I'm looking for here is, in this Bob Barker's case, they've got nothing in their documents, right? I'm looking for any interesting files that may have.
You're going to enumerate the file system and see what you can get.
Right, and so he's got nothing. So we look at the other users and we see there are a couple others on here, but we can't access them because we don't have administrative rights. But if we want to know, like, what are these users, we can query net user, so like J Carson domain. Okay, so that user's in the IT admins, which tells me that they may have actually something interesting in there. They may have a script or something.
Or IT admins might just be part of domain admins anyway.
Could be.
It's possible.
Yeah, that's true. So they may even have domain administrator access. So I would like to get access to this person's documents. But I can't unless I have either their account or domain admin account or basically a local admin or system level account. Mm-hmm. So if I already had local admin, I could just open that folder and view everything in there. And if they've got a script, I'm good. But I don't. So the first question is, how do we get that? Mm-hmm. And maybe we exploit.
How do you get it?
Yeah. There's a bunch of different ways you could. Maybe we exploit. We find some missing patches and we use some off-the-shelf exploit and just get system or something like that. But what worked in this other case.
Since we're going through the steps of the blog, we're going to keep things somewhat narrow since we do only have.
We're kind of just walking through that process that we happen to do on that engagement. And this has worked on multiple clients for me, is one way that some organizations configure local administrator passwords is through group policy machine preferences. And what happens is you configure the password in the group policy, it gets pushed out to all the systems, it changes the password for the account, and the password's encrypted, but Microsoft published their encryption key for it. So
it's AES, but then they gave you the key.
Yeah, it's AES encryption.
And it's not salted.
No, it's the same key, same encryption across every Windows system, everywhere. So even though it's encrypted, it might as well be plain text, basically. It's more obfuscated.
So the first big takeaway is if you're publishing your passwords using group policy preferences, don't.
Yeah, don't do that.
Immediately.
And in fact, on newer versions, like I think since 2012 and later, if you try to do it, it's actually grayed out.
They did actually patch through some patches at one point.
Yeah. So in this particular case, I actually had to go brute force add it in for the sake of the demo. But in this client engagement, it legitimately was configured that way. And in other clients' situations, it's worked as well. So how do we exploit that? So we can do it kind of a manual way. So if we look at what our logon server is, webinar DC01.
We've got very handy self-documenting domain nomenclature, so we can be pretty sure that's a domain controller. I mean, it's a logon server, so it is.
Okay, so we do net view, and we see, that's where sysvol is, and that's where all the group policy stuff's stored. And the thing is, any authenticated domain user, regardless of their permission level, is going to have access to that. So even though I'm not any kind of admin, I can access pretty much everything in sysvol.
You have read only because that's how policies happen.
Right, but the policy is pushed out through sysvol. I'm an authenticated user. I can actually read the policy. So what we'll do, we'll use the G drive, and we'll mount sysvol to the G drive. Okay.
And we're doing this in all kind of the manual way.
Yeah, there are automated ways.
Lots of ways. GP results.
I'll show you a slightly more manual process first. Okay, so now we're in sysvol, and so if we just do dir/s/p, this will do a recursive search, and the group policy, the machine preferences are stored in a groups.xml file, so we'll search for that. Okay, that was quick. So there's only one, and in some cases you may find many, in which case an automated tool will help you. In this case, there's only the one. So I'll browse to it here. Where are we? Policies, this one, machine preferences, groups. Okay, groups.xml. So that's the file I found here. And we'll open it in Notepad and see what's in it.
Just to make it prettier.
Yeah, we could do it in command prompt, but it's harder to read and copy and paste that way. So we'll just do it here.
So we get some information.
Yeah.
You can see, username is just admin.
Well, first of all, it applies to the built-in administrator account. But if you look further, what we see, it's actually renaming the account to victim's the name of the domain. So it's victim local admin.
So they actually did a good thing and renamed the domain of the administrator account.
Yeah. So you wouldn't just brute force the default username. You need to know this name, which now I know. And then you see the C password string. This is where the encrypted password is stored. So this string here is the password. It's encrypted, and I believe then base64 coded. So how can we use this if it's encrypted? Well, there are free, easily available
Microsoft
tools.
published the keys, so
So
somebody wrote a script.
You could do some manual, decryption and that kind of thing, or we can use. So this window here is it's a Kali VM running on a different network. So this box is external to the domain we're trying to hack into. This is sort of simulating our attacking box. So GPP decrypt is what it's called. We just paste the string here, hit enter.
And there you go.
And there you go. It decoded it to all your base are belong to us.
Nice password.
In leet speak. So. And they may have thought, that looks strong.
I mean, it's pretty long.
It's long. It's got a lot of.
It is based on a reasonably popular internet phrase from 1942.
But even if this was a completely random 20-character string, it doesn't matter because we can just grab it out of the group policy preference.
Yep, that's right there.
So now we have this. So we should be able to gain access as them. So let's try. Let's switch back there. We'll do run as user victim local.
Space.
Yeah. Victim local admin and then cmd.exe. Enter the password. Let's paste it here. Now I have a new command prompt. And who am I? Victim local admin. So now we've got local admin on the box. So what can we do with this? Well, initially we wanted to look through those user folders. So. Okay, so let's look into that Jay Carson since he's the IT admin. And we'll check documents. And what do you know? Secret file.txt. What could that possibly be? So
I'm guessing it's either cake or passwords.
Yeah. So in the actual engagement, it was what I happened to find that time was a PowerShell script. So it was a little less obvious. It was like script1.PowerShell or something. But
scripts are a common target, to be very clear.
I always look for that stuff.
We like scripts when we're looking around the files because we've definitely found lots of, if not even passwords, then at least we know, some automated operations that are going on in your network, or addresses of servers or server types. It's just data.
So basically, you can kind of pretend this is a script. For the sake of the demo, I just made it obvious. So let's go ahead and type out the contents of that file. Okay, and so it kind of looks like a message that maybe was emailed to them. They copied and pasted in a text document for their own reference. But it says, here are the credentials for your dev domain account. Your dev domain admin account, it'll only work on the dev domain, so you can't mess anything up in production. So we know this is a domain, likely domain admin account for the dev domain, and it's only going to work on that domain. Normally, I would verify that, but in this case, to save time,
But that kind of sucks. We got credentials to a domain we don't even care about.
Right. It's we really want to compromise corporate domain. I don't care about some development domain really, but it gives us a further foothold in the network. More compromised systems, potentially more backdoors in case they discover our activities. But what I would really want to look for, and what I looked for in this other case, would be accounts that are used in both domains that maybe have the same password.
Right. Maybe.
You don't always know, but humans are predictable.
Pretty lazy.
And and we like to use the same passwords for a bunch of different things. So, okay, so let's see what we can do now. So let's open up another remote desktop. So a remote desktop within a remote desktop. Oh, I typoed it.
Gotta type it right.
Okay. So we've got the IP. This is a DC, so presumably domain controller for this dev domain. The username is Johnny Dev, and let's copy this password. Okay. And it's already there because I tested this earlier. So I'll paste in the password. Okay, and it worked.
Okay.
So
now we're on a different domain controller.
Right.
But that's not nothing.
It's still domain admin for some other domain. We don't really know what they're doing with it. In this case, it's nothing, but there may be important stuff here that they still wouldn't want us to see. But let's see, net user Johnny Dev domain. Okay, and we can confirm now based on this here that I am in the domain admins group. So we essentially own this domain now. But what I'd like to do, as I mentioned earlier, is we want to see if there's any similar user accounts. Well, what I want to do is dump all the password hashes, and hopefully one of those accounts will match the other. So
we're here. We might as well grab what we can out of it.
So there are multiple ways to do it.
Lots of ways to get it.
I'm going to use Interpreter because I'm going to need to use it later anyway. So we'll go back here, and we will. I'm just going to type this in, and I'll explain it. lhost.
That's the Dutch version.
Yeah, basically what we're trying to do is generate a sort of a reverse interpreter shell back to our attacking machine. Or we're going to create the payload. All right, double check this. So MSF Venom is going to create the interpreter. This is the interpreter payload, a reverse TCP, meaning that when the victim executes it, it will connect back to us. lhost, this is our listener host. This is the IP address of our attacking machine. It's going to connect back on port 80. We'll choose that because port 80 is often permitted through firewalls. And then we're going to save it in exe format as the file met80.exe. So we run that. Takes a minute to load up all the scripts and do its thing.
443 might be a better option. Because there's less of a chance of it getting detected, and it just takes more border technology to deal with SSL encrypted traffic. But for the demo, we're using 80.
So I copied it to the Apache document root, and then started up the Apache web server. And the goal here is we need to get that exe file onto the dev domain controller. So now it's available on the internet. So we'll load up Internet Explorer. Do I have the IP still? I'll grab the IP.
So while you're doing that, we got a question. Assuming one works in an environment where password policies are generally lax or not enforced, as the question asker does, Are there tools similar to LastPass or others that would allow a lay user to encourage their admins and security folks to require different passwords or login usernames? That is a heck of a question. Tool-wise, what you kind of want to get away from is the human element of passwords, if you can help it. I know that the Thycotic Secret Server, for instance, the kind of expensive but worthwhile professional tiers include automated password rotation. So if you give them basically Windows access or SSH access or whatever, and tell them to maintain this password and rotate it every 15, 45, 90 days, whatever, it'll do that. So at that point, it's generating big random strings of nonsense, which admins should be copying and pasting anyway, because frankly, a lot of passwords don't need to be typable or memorable or like that, especially when you're doing IT admin. You shouldn't have my favorite password as password. It should be garble, 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 garble. And if you've got a tool that will actually rotate that for you and maintain it and maintain all of these service accounts, that's a bonus. We could get into a whole thing on that, but another shortcut thing to mention would be that Windows especially has some policies and some tools to help with service account maintenance and kind of local admin account maintenance. I think you actually mentioned one of those.
Labs. It's called local account
and
password.
I'm totally failing on the service account policy right now. It's another crunchy acronym. Google around and you'll find it.
I think we'll talk. I think I have something written down too later after we're done with the demo here. So basically what I did was I downloaded that Met 80. I ran as an administrator, although first I started the interpreter, the Metasploit reverse handler. So it was listening on port 80 for the reverse connection, and then it created the interpreter shell. And now I'm showing you here that our shell is running as the Johnny Dev user on this box, which is the same as up here. Okay, so now we got interpreter shell. And we want to get the hashes. Normally you can just type hash dump, but you actually need to be system since we're admin.
We're running as local as domain admin right now, which is not quite good enough.
Yes, you need to dump hashes. You generally need system access. So Interpreter has a handy tool called get system. That if you have high enough privileges, it'll find some way to get you system access, and you can confirm that we are now running a system.
Sweet.
So
let's get those hashes.
Still doesn't work, and generally that's because you need to have the interpreter running in a system level process, and it's or at least one that was already running a system before you're logged in. So what we'll do is we'll look for one, which
because you launch the interpreter as an admin,
right,
and not a system.
Not a system.
It doesn't. The getting system doesn't migrate the process over.
So let's see. Here's one here. SVC host 3024. Great. So it has another handy tool called migrate. Migrate 3024. And what it'll do is actually migrate the interpreter session to a different process that was already running a
system process.
Yeah. In this case, that's what we're doing. Okay. And then we can verify we still have system. And now if we try hash dump,
there we go. That's what we want.
So now we've got a list of users and hashes for the domain. In this case, there aren't very many, but you can see
an IT monitor in there, which is pretty familiar.
Yeah,
so we see that before.
IT monitor. If we come back to our original box that we compromised, and we look at the users, there's IT monitor.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So that tells us that user likely exists on both domains, and we can confirm it with the net user IT monitor domain. What did I do?
What did you type?
I did 2 slashes.
There we
And
go.
look, it's domain admins on this domain.
Of course it is.
So my guess would be that the IT monitor account, and I've seen this before, is where people have some IT monitoring solution that automatically connects to all these machines and grabs information into a central console. And they always configure with domain admin level access. Because
that
for some reason, that's how it works. It doesn't work any other way,
Right.
And then even though it's multiple domains, it's just having the one username and the one password makes it easier.
There's probably one password entry for it somewhere.
Okay, so we have, let's see, where are we? We have the hash right here. And we can either throw it into a password cracker, but that could take a really long time. So we'll try to do what they call pass the hash. Let's copy this. Back around the session. Running low on time here. What's our session? 3. Okay.
You have 5 minutes to hack this domain. Go.
Oh man. SMB PS6. Okay. Let's see if our options are still configured from before. That'll make it quicker.
Oh, that would be nice. Really explain quickly. I mean,
it is.
If you're not too familiar with Metasploit, you can keep going.
Well, everyone's going to explain what I'm doing here.
Sure.
So
You can explain.
We got our host configured. This is a domain controller IP because we want to attack the domain controller now because we have domain admin. We want to get access to that box. So here's your domain controller IP. We've got the SMB domain set to victim. SMB pass. You don't need to set a password, but you can also actually just set the hash. You don't need to know the password if you have the hash. In this case, this is the way Windows SMB authentication works. You can actually give the hash, and it will authenticate you still.
Yeah.
So we don't need to crack it. We'll just give the hash, and then the user is IT monitor. And then we want to set, let's see. We need to reconfigure the lhost parameter to our public IP because we want the domain controller to connect back to us, to our attacking machine.
Right.
And then...
Now, to be very clear, and you keep going, but we're configuring the remote host to the domain controller on a remote network that we don't have direct access to.
Yeah,
that was a local address
this box
on the
here,
internal network.
This box here is on the internet somewhere. So
Right.
if we try to attack the domain controller directly, we won't be able to reach it because it's it's behind the firewall. So what we want to do is configure a route. And then what was our session? 3? I think it was 3.
Question, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So what this does is it tells the interpreter any traffic we want to send to this network, the subnet 10.3.5, to route it through the interpreter session 3, which is what we have open. Double check. See, this is the tricky bit. This is the part that may or may not work. Let's see.
As a grand finale, this will work.
Well, let's see what happens when we hit. I don't think it's going to work actually. I think I need to spawn a different. I need to spawn a different.
You need to respawn your interpreter.
Interpreter shell. I think we need to run it not as with the admin.
And while you're doing that, I'll take another question. What about remote access to corporate network from home? What were ways to protect that link? There's a lot going on there. I mean, in the example that we gave, there was actually both a Citrix remote app publishing gateway and a VMware Horizon infrastructure, and at least for the purposes of this scope, those were protected, strictly speaking, on the border and the connection. We didn't attack that. We ended up social engineering our way through. Social engineering protection, we mentioned, was really about kind of identifying the weaknesses in password reset processes and getting a thumbs up, which is sweet. And making sure that people can't reset passwords through like the help desk without some verification.
Okay.
So
sorry to interrupt. I was excited it worked.
Gotta get going.
So yeah, we successfully passed the hash. We authenticated to the domain controller via SMB. Copied over the interpreter.
Found that the hash is the same on both domains.
Right, executed system. So now we have system access on webinar DCL1.
Sweet.
So if we do the same technique as before, we migrate to different process.
Different process.
See if this works.
We're literally at 1 minute remaining.
Okay.
There we are.
So now we have all the hashes for the corporate domain. Which
and we've got system on a domain
there's like 1,000 of these things.
Right, and we've got system on a domain controller.
And system on a domain controller. So in this case, even if we couldn't crack any of these passwords, if a domain admin logs into the system and there's a token on there for them, we can steal that token, impersonate the domain admin, and get domain level access. So even if you've got system on a domain controller, you're basically gold at that point as a hacker,
right?
And you're in a lot of trouble as the organization. So
okay, so really quick with less than a minute remaining, wrapping up.
Damn.
Move that over.
Oh, it's sorry.
Restart it. Now we have to do the webinar again.
No, we're starting over. Prevention.
Okay. So yeah, you mentioned the Microsoft Labs for disseminating some and using some service level and local admin passwords.
Mhm.
Protect the data that should be precious. Passwords should not be stored in plain text on desktops. They should not be embedded in scripts. Definitely not embedded in group policy under any circumstances.
Yeah, definitely don't want to use that anymore.
Yeah. And
good reason too.
And tune your SOC. Have a SOC, have logging, have data aggregation, and then make sure that you're looking through for suspicious alarms. You've got adequate thresholds. So
Last slide.
Red teaming. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it?
You want to test red team's going to test your entire security program basically at once, rather than just the individual, like we mentioned earlier, the external versus internal versus social versus Wi-Fi, versus whatever. It's like everything all at once, right? We're going to find the weak links. It's going to best simulate a real world motivated attacker, like someone that specifically wants to target you for whatever reason,
right?
Not just whoever's easiest to get, rig into is all they want is credit cards. I don't care where it comes from. Like they want to attack you. What can they do?
But to be very clear, you should be a high maturity organization and have something to actually have reasons to actually have this kind of test, because the focus and scope of it is a lot more narrow than data gathering penetration testing, which would be a lot more useful for lower maturity organizations or organizations that need security data to improve themselves. Red teams are really a specific test of can it be done and how.
Those are the two big reasons.
What are our weaknesses? Yeah.
You either think you've got strong overall security program. Yeah.
So we're going over it. Thank you, folks. Please feel free to forward us or mail us any other questions if you have any as a result of this. And aside from that, we'll see you on the blogs.
Thank you.